My name is Olivia Morgan. I'm 30 years old, a financial analyst in Cedarwood, Ohio, and for the first time in my adult life, I finally felt like I could breathe. My peace was something I had built, brick by brick, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. It lived within the four walls of my two-bedroom condo, a place I'd bled for, working 60-hour weeks and living on ramen noodles for years to afford. This wasn't just an apartment, it was my sanctuary. A quiet, orderly space where the throw pillows stayed perfectly fluffed and the only drama came from the Netflix shows I binged on weekends. It was mine. Every square inch of it. That particular Saturday afternoon, the autumn sun was casting long, lazy shadows across my living room floor. I was curled up on the couch, lost in a novel, a mug of cooling tea on the coaster beside me. Life was good. It was simple. And then the doorbell rang. It wasn't a friendly, neighborly chime. It was a frantic, insistent series of jabs, sharp enough to pierce the bubble of tranquility I'd so carefully constructed. I sighed, marking my page, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw two familiar figures, their shoulders slumped, their faces etched with a weariness I hadn't seen before. I opened the door. There stood my parents, Richard and Brenda Morgan, flanked by a small mountain of luggage. They looked like refugees from a storm I hadn't known was brewing. Before I could even form a question, my mother's voice, thin and watery, cut through the hallway air. "Olivia, honey. We need to stay with you. We've lost everything." I just stared, my brain struggling to process the scene. My parents, the ever-composed, always in control Richard and Brenda, looked utterly defeated. My father, a man whose pride was his most defining feature, couldn't even meet my eyes. He just mumbled, his gaze fixed on a scuff mark on his expensive leather shoes. "What are you talking about? What happened?" I asked, stepping aside to let them in. They shuffled past me, dragging their suitcases into my pristine entryway. The scent of my mother's cloying perfume and my father's stale anxiety immediately filled the space. My mother sank onto my entryway bench, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue that appeared from nowhere. "It was the investments, Liv," she said, her voice catching theatrically. "Your father, he trusted the wrong people. It all happened so fast. One day we had our home, our savings, the next, the bank took it all. We were blindsided." My father chimed in, his voice gruff with forced humility. "It's just temporary, sweetheart. Just until we can get back on our feet." I wanted to believe them. I really did. A part of me, the little girl who had always craved their approval, felt a pang of sympathy. So, I did what any daughter is supposed to do. I showed them to the guest room, told them to make themselves comfortable, and offered them a drink. But as they settled in, another part of me, the financial analyst who spends her days sniffing out bad investments and fabricated stories, was screaming. Something felt off. Terribly off. Their performance was too polished. Their grief felt rehearsed. And as they started unpacking, it wasn't with the frantic energy of people who just lost their entire world. It was with a strange, unsettling sense of permanence. My mother immediately began rearranging the decorative towels in the guest bathroom. My father, after a cursory glance around my living room, grunted, "This TV is a bit small, isn't it? We'll have to look into getting something better." The comment hung in the air, thick with entitlement. We? Who was we? It was my home. My TV. My peace, which was already beginning to feel like a distant memory. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying their story over and over. It was riddled with holes. I knew for a fact that they'd paid off their mortgage over a decade ago. Their house, the one I grew up in, was theirs free and clear. How do you lose a paid-off house overnight from bad investments? You don't. Not unless there's a massive line of credit, something my fiscally conservative father would never have entertained. My mind drifted back through the years, a highlight reel of financial double standards. I remembered my sophomore year of college, begging them for a small loan to cover my textbooks. My father had sat me down and given me a stern lecture about fiscal responsibility, a lecture that ended with the classic line, "Money doesn't grow on trees, Olivia." I ended up taking on an extra shift at the campus library, my grades slipping as a result. A year later, my brother Liam, the golden child, decided he wanted a new sports car for his 21st birthday. Suddenly, a veritable forest of money trees had sprouted in their backyard. He got the car. I got debt. The next morning, the pit in my stomach grew. I walked into the kitchen to find my mother scrolling on her iPad, a cup of my expensive coffee in her hand. I glanced over her shoulder. She was browsing the website for a high-end furniture store, looking at a plush, ridiculously expensive sectional sofa. When she noticed me, she quickly swiped the screen away, a faint blush creeping up her neck. "Oh, just looking for fun, dear," she said, her smile a little too bright. A girl can dream, can't she? That was it. My internal alarm bells went from a dull hum to a deafening siren. I retreated to my bedroom, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and anger. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to my oldest friend, Finn Riley. He'd been my rock since college and was now one of the sharpest lawyers in Cedarwood. "Hey Finn. Got a weird situation. Can you do me a huge favor and discreetly look up the property records for my parents' address? They're telling me they lost the house. Something doesn't add up." His reply was almost instantaneous. "On it, Liv. I'll let you know what I find." The next 2 days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. My parents settled into my condo with the ease of conquering monarchs. My mother reorganized my pantry, tutaying about my lack of brand-name spices. My father commandeered the remote control, filling my quiet sanctuary with the blare of 24-hour news channels. Every time I gently prodded them about their plans, "Have you looked at rental applications? Have you contacted a financial advisor?" I was met with vague deflections and subtle guilt trips. "Don't you worry your pretty little head, honey," my mother would say, patting my hand. "We just need a moment to breathe. You're such a good daughter for giving us this space." The space was feeling less like a gift and more like a hostile takeover. The breaking point came in the form of my Aunt Genevieve. She was my mother's younger sister, but they were night and day. Where my mother was soft, manipulative, and obsessed with appearances, Aunt Jen was a steel-toed boot of brutal honesty. She called me on Tuesday evening. "I heard your parents are squatting at your place," she said, dispensing with any pleasantries. That was Jen. "They're staying with me," I corrected, the words tasting like ash. "They said they lost the house." A dry, humorless laugh crackled through the phone. "Oh, honey. No. They didn't lose the house. They sold it." I froze, my knuckles white on the phone. "What? Sold it? Lock, stock, and barrel. Closed about a month ago," she continued, her voice sharp. "They got a hell of a price for it, too. I heard it from Susan next door to them." I sank onto my bed, my head spinning. "But, why? Where did the money go?" The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with a pity that made my skin crawl. "To Liam, of course. All of it. Every last cent. Apparently, his new girlfriend, the tech genius Serafina, convinced him he's the next Mark Zuckerberg. They needed seed money for some stupid app, and part of their business plan involved buying a ridiculously lavish house in the wealthiest part of town to impress investors. She spat the words out like they were poison. "Your parents bought the whole story. Poured their entire retirement, their entire legacy, into Liam's little fantasy. And they just assumed their backup plan would be you. The phone felt slick in my hand. It wasn't just a lie. It was a betrayal on a scale I couldn't comprehend. They hadn't just chosen my brother over their own security, they had chosen him over my life, my home, my sanity. They had looked at the $750,000 they'd earned over a lifetime of work, looked at their 2 children, and decided one was worth everything, and the other was worth nothing more than a spare room to crash in. The pain was sharp and visceral, a physical blow to my chest. All the small slights, the forgotten birthdays, the dismissed accomplishments, it all coalesced into this one monstrous act of favoritism. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Finn. I answered, my voice barely a whisper. Jen just told me. I'm looking at the documents right now, Liv, he said, his tone grim and professional. She's right. The house was sold 4 weeks ago. The sale price was $750,000. The funds were wired directly from escrow to an LLC. I did a quick search on the LLC. It was registered 2 months ago by your brother, Liam Morgan. He paused. That LLC then purchased a property over in the Chestnut Hills district. Cash deal. No mortgage. He didn't need to say anything else. Chestnut Hills was where the doctors and old money families lived. It was a world away from my modest condo. Can you send me everything you have? I asked, my voice shaking. Already in your inbox, he replied. Liv, I'm so sorry. I hung up and opened my email. There it was, in black and white. The deed transfer. The sale price. The LLC documents. The proof. The undeniable, soul-crushing proof. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The grief I felt was immense, but something else was rising underneath it, something cold and hard and sharp. It was anger. A pure, clarifying rage that burned away the tears and left behind a core of solid steel. They hadn't just lied to me. They had tried to make a fool out of me. And they had done it while sleeping under my roof, eating my food, and judging the size of my television. The game was over. If you're enjoying this story, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And let me know what city you're watching from in the comments below. Every comment helps the story reach more people. Thank you so much, and let's get back to it. After I got off the phone with Finn, I didn't move for a long time. I just sat on my bed, the damning evidence glowing on my laptop screen. The initial shockwave of pain had passed, leaving a strange, unnerving calm in its wake. It was the calm of a decision being made, of a line being drawn so deep in the sand that it could never be washed away. I thought about my home. I thought about the years of sacrifice, the missed vacations, the cheap takeout dinners, all funneled into this place. It wasn't just drywall and floorboards, it was the physical manifestation of my independence. It was the one place on earth they couldn't touch, the one part of my life I had built far away from the shadow of my golden boy brother. And now, they were here. They had brought their lies and their disrespect into my sanctuary, believing they had the right. I stood up and walked to the mirror. The woman looking back at me was pale and her eyes were shadowed, but there was a hardness in her expression I hadn't seen before. The people-pleaser, the dutiful daughter who had spent 3 decades twisting herself into knots for a crumb of their approval, was gone. She had died somewhere between the lie about the bad investments and the proof of the $750,000 transfer. I took a deep breath. It was time to evict her ghosts. I waited until evening. I let them enjoy one last dinner made with my groceries, one last evening of television on my couch. I watched them from the kitchen, my arms crossed, feeling like a predator observing its prey. They were so comfortable, so blissfully unaware. My father was complaining about a call a referee made in the football game, and my mother was nodding along, patting his arm. Finally, I walked into the living room and clicked the television off. The sudden silence was jarring. We need to talk, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a razor. My mother looked up, startled. Olivia, what's wrong? You look so serious. I had a very interesting conversation today, I began, my eyes fixed on my father. About your old house. My father shifted in his seat, his guard immediately up. What about it? It's a sore subject, Olivia. Is it? I asked, taking a step closer. Because I heard it wasn't lost. I heard it was sold. The color drained from my mother's face. She shot a panicked look at my father. He, however, went on the offensive. His face hardened, turning a blotchy red. Who have you been talking to? Spreading gossip. Is that what this is? This is about the truth, I said, my voice rising slightly. A truth you didn't think I deserved to know. How can you be so cold? My mother wailed, the tears starting on cue. We're your parents. We're in crisis. We came to you for help. The crisis, I said, my voice dropping to an icy calm, is that you're liars. You stood in my home and you lied to my face. I told them what Aunt Genevieve had said. They denied it, calling her a jealous troublemaker. They tried to twist it, to make me the villain. That's when I pulled out my final card. You know, it's funny, I said, pulling out my phone. Because my friend, Finn Riley, the lawyer. He saw the same thing Jen did. Except he saw it on official county records. I turned the screen toward them, displaying the email from Finn, the PDF of the deed transfer open for them to see. The sale price. $750,000. Wired to an LLC owned by Liam. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. My mother's fake sobs choked in her throat. My father stared at the phone, his jaw working, his face a mask of pure fury. He slowly rose to his feet. You went behind our backs, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. You investigated your own family. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You gave me no choice. You showed up here with a ridiculous story and expected me to just roll over and accept it. After everything we did for you, he started, his fists clenching at his sides. You ungrateful child. That's what broke me. Everything you did for me. I shot back, the years of resentment finally boiling over. You mean like the student loans I'm still paying off while Liam drove a brand new car you paid for? Or the way you've never once, not once, acknowledged my career while you tell anyone who will listen about his imaginary startup? Everything you did was for him. The truth of it, spoken aloud, was like a physical blow. He staggered back, not from the force of my words, but from the shock of being challenged. He looked at me, his daughter, and didn't see me. He saw a rebellion. An asset that was refusing to perform its function. His face contorted, and he pointed a shaking finger at me. You know what? He screamed, his voice cracking with rage, spit flying from his lips. You're dead to me. You hear me? Dead. Dead to me. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of the room. It wasn't a slap, but it hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. It was the final, brutal severing of a bond that had been fraying for years. In that moment, I understood. I wasn't a daughter to him, I was a resource. A safety net. And now that I was refusing to function as one, I was being discarded. The pain was immense, but it was also liberating. He had given me an out. He had drawn the line, and all I had to do was step over it. The hurt inside me crystallized into something cold and unbreakable. My expression must have changed, because the triumphant rage on his face faltered, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. Get out, I said. My voice was devoid of all emotion. It was flat, toneless, final. My mother gasped. Olivia, you don't mean that. Oh, I do, I said, turning my dead-eyed gaze on her. I want both of you out of my house. Now. My father scoffed, regaining some of his bluster. You can't throw us out. We're your parents. You stopped being my parents when you decided my home was your retirement plan, I retorted. I walked over to the front door and opened it wide. You have 30 minutes to pack your bags and leave my property. If you are not gone by then, I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes. They thought it was a bluff, a childish tantrum. My father crossed his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. My mother renewed her weeping, muttering about how I was breaking her heart. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply walked into my kitchen, set my phone on the counter, and started a 30-minute timer. Then I leaned against the counter and waited. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. The air was thick with their disbelief and my silent, unshakable resolve. My father paced, muttering curses under his breath. My mother pleaded, her voice rising and falling in pathetic waves. Think about what you're doing, Olivia. Family is all we have. I didn't respond. I just watched the numbers on the timer tick down. 1500 hours, 10 o'clock. 5 o'clock, they made no move to pack. They were testing me, waiting for me to crack, to dissolve into the dutiful, forgiving daughter they had always known. But she wasn't there anymore. When the timer hit 0, a soft chime filled the tense silence. I pushed myself off the counter, picked up my phone, and calmly dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? The dispatcher's voice asked. Hello, I said, my voice steady. I'm at 125 Willow Creek Lane, apartment 3B. I have 2 trespassers in my apartment who are refusing to leave. I could hear my mother let out a strangled sob. The police arrived in less than 10 minutes. 2 officers, a man and a woman, stood at my open door, their expressions neutral. I explained the situation calmly and concisely, providing them with my lease agreement and ID. They are my parents, I concluded. They were guests. I have revoked my consent for them to be here, and they are refusing to vacate the premises. The male officer turned to my parents. Ma'am, sir, is this correct? My father exploded. She's out of her mind. This is a family matter. You have no right. The officer held up a hand. Sir, right now, it's a property matter. Ms. Morgan has proven residency. You have not. I need you and your wife to gather your belongings and leave. They were escorted out, dragging their suitcases behind them. As they passed me in the doorway, my mother looked at me, her eyes pleading. My father looked at me with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, holding my ground, until they were gone. Then, I closed my door, locked it, and leaned against it, the silence of my home finally, blessedly, returning. The weeks that followed were quiet. I went to work. I came home. I reveled in the silence, in the feeling of my space being truly mine again. I didn't hear from them, and I didn't reach out. The only updates I got were from Aunt Genevieve, who delivered them with a grim sort of satisfaction. The first piece of news came a week after the eviction. My parents had, as planned, moved in with Liam and Serafina at their new mansion. The arrangement lasted exactly 6 days. Apparently, my mother's constant nagging and my father's foul temper didn't mesh well with Liam's new, self-important lifestyle. Serafina, in particular, couldn't stand them. Liam kicked them out, telling them they were killing his creative vibe. They ended up in a dingy extended-stay motel on the edge of town. About a month after that, the main event happened. Liam's brilliant startup, the one my parents had sacrificed everything for, imploded. It turned out that Genius App was a vague, unworkable idea, and the investors were non-existent. Serafina, the mastermind, had convinced Liam to mortgage the new house to the hilt and invest the money in some high-risk crypto scheme. It went to zero, almost overnight. And Serafina? She vanished. One day she was there, the next she was gone, having cleaned out whatever was left in their joint bank account. Liam was left with nothing but a mountain of debt, a foreclosure notice, and the crushing weight of his own stupidity. He lost the house. He lost the girl. He lost everything. Before they completely imploded, my parents made one last-ditch effort to ruin my life. They started a smear campaign, telling old family friends and neighbors that their heartless daughter had thrown them out onto the street for no reason. The gossip reached me, and for a moment, the old sting of their disapproval returned. But it was quickly replaced by resolve. I had Finn draft a cease and desist letter, citing defamation of character. He sent it to their motel. The whispers stopped. Then, one evening, I was making dinner when my phone lit up on the counter. The screen read, "Mom." I stopped chopping vegetables and just stared at it. My heart gave a painful thud. 100 different emotions swirled inside me, a flicker of the old, conditioned guilt, a wave of sadness for the mother I wished I had, but mostly, a deep, profound sense of peace that I had fought for and won. I thought about the lies. I thought about the disrespect. I thought about the sound of my father's voice screaming that I was dead to him. I thought about the silence in my apartment after the police had left, how it felt like breathing for the first time. The phone continued to buzz, a desperate, electronic plea. Without taking my eyes off the screen, I reached out and pressed the red button. Decline. Then, I opened my contacts, found her number, and pressed block. I did the same for my father and my brother. A sense of finality, clean and absolute, settled over me. I was done. I was free. I turned back to my chopping board and continued making my dinner, in my home, in my quiet, peaceful life. It was the hardest decision of my life, but looking back, I know it was the right one. But I still wonder sometimes. Am I the bad guy for cutting off my own parents to protect my peace? Thank you for listening to my story. If you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below.